Hey, welcome back, everyone, to a very special episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with our three extraordinary guests. But first, we want to give a shout out to our podcast partners, the Global Community of Women in High School Sports, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, We Coach, and the Florida Coaches Coalition. You've heard me say many times, these are four great organizations. You really need to add them to your network. And now, please don't hit that fast forward button. Spend the next 3 minutes, take a listen to our sponsorship messages. These are all companies that I used as a coach or as an athletic director. You should be using them too. Here we go. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. The Wall of Fame is actually an interactive touchscreen video console that allows you to share your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. It's also a great way to display your school records for all your sports or your school's Hall of Fame. To find out more information, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention that you heard about it on the podcast. They'll give you a nice discount. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com, bringing your school's legacy to life. We also want to thank Home Campus, the exclusive high school and state association management platform for the podcast. Home Campus is also your one-stop platform for scheduling, student-athlete eligibility and clearance, state association connections, and so much more. As an athletic director, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just fantastic. And the Home Campus staff was great to work with, too. For more information, go to homecampus.com. It's that easy. homecampus.com. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed them to coach our kids at the highest level. Go to huddle.com and see why we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Gipper is the exclusive social media graphics solution for the Educational AD Podcast. And if you go to Gipper.com, they're going to help you create world-class sports graphics in seconds for your school. Celebrate your athletes, promote your team. It's used by over 3,000 athletic programs, and you're going to become a professional graphic designer in no time at all. It's so easy, even I can use it. That's Gipper.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a discount from them as well. Go to Gipper.com for more information. We also want to say thanks to all the people at Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. That's snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you as an athletic director do your job better. If you're looking for a fundraiser, you need to look no more. Snap Raise is your fundraiser. But there's also Snap Spend, Snap Connect, Snap Store, Snap Manage. Check out the entire suite at snapraise.com. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. It's probably one of the best purchases I ever made as an athletic director. Their products not only generate income for your department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. Check them out today. We want to say thanks to District 1. Go to district1.com. That's WON. And you're going to feel like you've won because District 1 offers you custom uniforms. You can get them in 20 business days or less. And here's the best part. You'd never have to order a full set again when you're only trying to replace one or two pieces. That's district1.com. Click on the Team Gear button and get your free quote. District1WON.com. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to show you how to set up and sell your tickets online for all your events, not just athletic events. And the best part, every step of the way, you are going to have a dedicated client success manager providing hands-on support. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. Simple, and easy online ticketing. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey for your athletic department. It's going to let you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. Athletic directors typically only hear back from the complainers and the gripers, but that's only about 2% of your population. Athletic surveys will connect you with that 2%, but they'll also connect you with the 98% that love and support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking to a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal or your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com to get started. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. We've got a very special show today. We were going to call it Three Wise Men, but now I guess we'll have to just call it Two Wise Men, plus me. We are visiting today with two past presidents from the FIAAA, and also two athletic directors, two leaders that were really instrumental in my growth as an athletic director in our state organization and really with the NIAAA. Our guest today, Russell Wambles. Russell's a certified master athletic administrator. He's currently the athletic director at Olympia High School, which is here in Florida. We're also joined by Jody Phillips. Jody's a certified athletic administrator, longtime school AD here in Florida, and most recently he was the county AD for Marion County here in Florida. I'm going to let them, speak here in just a second. But as someone who came to the FIAAA and the NIAAA late in my career, they actually taught, along with another AD who couldn't be with us today, the first LTI course that I took at our state conference. And the course was fantastic, but the two of them were just so encouraging to me as a newcomer to the organization. And really, I can't emphasize that enough. Just so encouraging to get involved, to, get on committees, to eventually, serve as president, that I wanted to, number one, acknowledge them. And number two, because they are wise men, give them an opportunity to share some of their wisdom with our listeners. So, Russ Wambles, welcome back to the Educational AD Podcast. You were one of our very first guests.
Thank you very much for having me. Couldn't be a better experience than to be with my old buddy Jody Phillips.
Okay. And Jody Phillips, this is your first time on the podcast, but again, appreciate you sharing time with us with one of your longtime friends, Russell, too.
Certainly, and very glad to be here, Jake. You said a lot of kind things, and it's really touche in the sense that you added a lot to us as well, and I know Russell will echo that. And ever since we met you, and if that LTI class was the first time, man, I tell you, a lot of good times that we shared, with you. And you were always an integral part of all of it. And, Russell and I do go back and we'll certainly, I'm sure we'll get into that, but thank you for having me.
Oh, no, absolutely. For our listeners, again, Russell was a guest in our very first season, really helped us grow the podcast. We were both still on the FIAAA board at the time. And he's had a very, I would say, impactful career in a number of ways in our profession. So, Russell, I know we only got a few minutes, but share with our listeners, if you will, kind of your journey in Florida as an athletic administrator, both school-wise and FIAAA and NIAAA.
Yeah, it would take more than a few minutes to explore my journey, but the short version is simply this. In '87, when I graduated college, I coached college baseball for a while in Arkansas, and then I took a job there as a coach and was an athletic director at the age of 23 at a very tiny rural school, simply because we only had two coaches and we were both idiots I just happened to be the lesser of the two idiots. So I got to make $2,000 extra a year, and then moved on from there eventually to North Georgia. I was in North Georgia for 4 years, just south of Chattanooga. Then made my way back to Florida. I'm originally from Florida, and made my way back to Florida after 4 years there, and was at Tavares High School, your new hometown. I was there for 10 years. The last 7 as the athletic director. Went to my alma mater in 2005, Apopka High School. Was there for a long time. And then left there and went to Dr. Phillips High School in Orlando, where I was at for 6 years. Went back to Apopka for 2 years. Got out of it for about 3 or 4 years, and was doing coaching education for human kinetics, and decided to go back into it this year. So I've only been here at Olympia High School for 1 year, and I'm having a blast working with great principal, great coaches, great community.
For people who are not familiar with those high schools in Florida, Apopka High School, Dr. Phillips, and now certainly Olympia, you had some good teams this year. Very successful in terms of, wins and losses and championships and things like that. What are some of the things at those stops that you've seen maybe as a common factor that helps lead to those trophies, if you will? We don't go into it to, win a state championship. I think it's a byproduct of doing a lot of things right. Any common ground from those 3 stops that you've mentioned?
I would say common ground would be it's just places that think excellence, and it's a culture. They obviously don't need tremendous leadership to achieve. That's obvious, but that's the big thing, is just having a culture of, we want to be excellent in all that we do. And that's what we preach to our coaches and our kids and our community, and strong feeder systems, and just the idea that we want to put, we before me, and having a good group of coaches. One thing I've always done at places, I'm not really big into firing coaches and things like that, but I've had to make coaching changes over the years, and it's usually had nothing at all to do with wins or losses.
Right.
It's strictly because they're not on board with the we mentality, and I kind of expect our coaches to support each other, and everyone to want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And when we don't have that mentality, it's time to move on and find a different person who's ready to buy in and work for the good, for the group rather than the me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like those schools were just, one trick ponies. They had a outstanding, whatever football or basketball team. All the teams were successful and are successful. Jody, let's go and share a little bit about your background. Russell mentioned he had the opportunity to come back and be the AD at the high school where he went. And I know that's part of your life. So share a little bit with our listeners, your career path here in Florida.
Somewhat similar. I never was out of state. So that is the one, I think, big difference between Russell and I. But I spent my whole career in education, which ended up being 26 years of my life in coaching, teaching, and then athletic administration, and went through, Vanguard High School, Dunellen High School, Bellevue High School. I took a little bit of time off like Russell did, and then went back to Bellevue High School. And ultimately, when I went back, I told the principal there at that time, who was Jim Yancey, who became our superintendent not long after. And I told him, I said, look, I would never leave you again, except if I could go back to my alma mater, which was Forest High School at the time. And lo and behold, about 2 months after he hired me back at Bellevue, my former high school coach became the head football coach at Forest, and came and made a phone call happens to be that his brother was Jim Yancey, who I so called and asked if he could talk to me, and so I only lasted back at Bellevue about 2 months, and then went back to Forest. And anyway, and then I ended my school career there. And as you mentioned earlier, I ended my education career at the county office as our county AD here for about 7 years of my time to end the career, and it was wonderful. And just I was so blessed, Jake. And we'll talk about FIAAA, and that's a huge part of my career's administration side. But here in Marion County, I was just blessed with great principals, really, really great principals. I was spoiled, honestly. I never, ever, ever, ever in my career, I can tell you, I never had a principal that did not love athletics. So it's hard for me to speak, from a different perspective, because the support from my principal was always outstanding. And just that was one of probably the thing that I look back at on my career the most times in education and think, golly, I never ever had a bad principal. So I'm spoiled in that facet.
No, and that's something that I think a lot of young ADs don't appreciate and sometimes don't understand, is that, you might have all the excitement, all the enthusiasm in the world, but if you're not getting that support from whether it's a principal or a head of school at a private school, like, I spent most of my career at a private school, it's going to be extremely frustrating. So I can look back at my career and I can pick out one principal where it just it wasn't going to happen. And if I hadn't decided to leave at the end of the year, they would have asked me to leave. It just wasn't a good fit. But most of my career, particularly at my last stop at McClay up in Tallahassee, I had the best boss. They understood the value that athletics brings to the educational experience. It wasn't like a jockocracy, but they appreciated what athletics provided. Russ?
Certainly.
Russell, I see you raising your hand there.
No, I was just raising my hand, said, I'm mostly like Jody. But when you said that, every now and then there's that one person, so, I didn't encounter much of that, but there's some times, I tell people all the time, it's about having a good fit. It's got to be a good fit, and I would not be interested in working for a principal that was not 100% supportive of athletics, who gave me the authority to run the program. I wasn't like that when I was younger. I didn't want micromanagers, and I didn't want to have to battle with people. And fortunately, that was rare. I can't say never. That would be dishonest, but it was rare. Almost everyone I ever had was fantastic. And if you're an athletic director, your job's only as good as your relationship with your principal. It's that simple.
Agreed.
Yeah. And one of the job 1 or 1A for an athletic director is, keep problems off your principal's desk. Make sure you're running your program so that they don't have to call you up. But for our listeners, we've got two great guests today. Russell Wambles and Jody Phillips, both past presidents of the FIAAA here in Florida, longtime athletic directors. Russell's still an AD in our state. We're going to take a first break, but we're going to be back with some more, so please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support of the podcast. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. The Wall of Fame is actually an interactive touchscreen video console that allows you to share your school's outstanding moments, both past and present, for athletics, academics, and the arts. Also gives you a chance to share your school's diverse history and your top role models. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their great products, and when you're ready to buy, mention the podcast. You'll get a nice discount. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to say thanks to Home Campus. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association information management platform for the podcast. It's also your one-stop platform for scheduling, student-athlete eligibility and clearance, and a lot more. As a high school athletic director, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just great. And the Home Campus staff was great too. For more information on how you can become part of the home campus team, go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. You're going to love it. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided them that allowed them to coach our teams and our athletes at their highest level. At Huddle, we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users and turn your school into a Huddle school. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guests today are Jody Phillips and Russell Wambles, two longtime athletic directors here in Florida. Jody, let's go and start this next segment with you. One of the things that we try to do with the podcast is this idea of sharing best practices. So now I'm going to put you on the spot. What are some things that you did as a school-based AD or even as a county AD that, looking back, you're still particularly proud of, that you would consider best practices to share with our listeners?
Well, first, let me say this, and I'll let Russell can chime in on the jokes about what I'm going to say later on. But really and truly, I don't deserve any credit for anything that we did, because generally speaking, as I believe any good athletic director probably stole every idea, some way, shape, or form that they've got. So I can promise you half of what I did a lot of times was stuff that I learned from Russell, or Andy Childs, or Lannis Robinson, or yourself, or whomever. I mean, you just can name the names, and and that's the role that FIAAA and NIAAA played. Because you could go listen to these folks that were a whole lot smarter and had more money and more experience than me, and so certainly you jump on those coattails, and so I go back to this. With that said, I go back to this when I took over. Dave Horner preceded me as the AD at Forest, who was also a friend of Russell's. Russell knows well, served on the FHSAA board with him. But anyway, Coach Horner was one of my football coaches growing up. Great man, tremendous leader, and he always did a very good job of focusing on sportsmanship. But we kind of jumped into two things that I felt like were important, and Russell, I'm sure, could allude to this as well, being at Apopka. One of the things in Florida is community schools are kind of a lost thing now. So, in community meaning, that community that surrounds that school and supports it and shows up on Friday nights, not just for football games, but for basketball games and softball games and volleyball games and all of the above. So, we wanted to drive something that the community could be proud of. And so we wrapped our arms around two things. One was, how can we be focused and produce a quality product on the field with every sport that we offer at our school, JV, varsity, or otherwise, and everybody have buy-in from the community folks, parents, it doesn't matter, officials, everyone. So we developed through that, we had like a core board of people, and it was quite large, about 30 people, that, maybe even more, that we put together to deal with all of that I just mentioned. And, the core parts of it, again, were community involvement and sportsmanship, and raising the level and the buy-in of both. Wasn't a decision-making body. It's not anything. We're not setting the world on fire, but so how do we get there? And I'm proud to say that through the students and the community, and again, I'm gonna mention Andy, because Andy came and spoke for me. I think Russell got mad at me because I didn't invite him, but Andy had a state champion sportsmanship program. I can't remember where he was at the time, which school, but he won that FHSAA award. And I said, I want us to do this. It's important. And anyway, and we were able to do that twice. through the results of the efforts that these people from the community and our students and coaches bought into. And it took us a couple of years to get there, but they gained momentum. They learned the important parts of it. We learned how to control ourselves on and off the field. And anyway, I think that was one of the biggest things that we were able to do, because I thought we were kind of losing touch with the community to a certain extent. And I value that. And I think all athletic directors should in some way, even when in some of these metro areas and such, that's a tough ask. And I've never been asked to do that, so I don't have experience with it. But I can promise you, you get out there and somehow develop a sense of community amongst your school, not just with the student athletes, but the whole entire community. You'll see some great results. So I would tip our cap to that and those folks that were involved in that process with us.
Yeah, and it's one of the bigger challenges, I think, for athletic directors, because 100 years ago, when I was in high school, I'm a little bit older than you guys. Number one, it was more community focused, and you didn't have as many sports at the schools that we all offer
Correct.
now. And so you had a lot of the students that were fans back in the day. Now they're on their own teams, which is great. You want that. But it's a challenge. So looking for unique ways to get the community involved, that's great. And here's how this thing goes full circle. As you were sharing that, I was thinking back to that first LTI course that you and Russell and Kevin taught, and you had some clippings from your high school. I took that idea in true AD fashion back to my school, Palmer Trinity at the time. 2 years later, we won the state championship in sportsmanship for our class. And then we did it again at McClay up in Tallahassee. So there's another example of, in this case, it was you influencing me, but as you alluded to, there's no original ideas. Everybody steals from each other. But I know how hard it is to get that state championship. And as you know, it's the only award in Florida where, besides the trophy, you get a cash award.
That is right.
For that.
Yes.
And we share that with our coaches and our kids. So thanks so much for sharing that. Russell, best practices from some of the schools that you've been at. Again, whether you stole the idea back from Jody or Andy or somebody else, what are some things that you can share with our listeners that you found to be best practices?
Well, I think Jody, it seems like maybe he stole my notes or something, because basically, it's basically the same stuff. But I will have to say this: he said something about money a while ago and people that have more money than him, and I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know anybody that has more money than Jody Phillips. So I don't know who that is. And the only reason I got mad about you inviting Andy, which, by the way, I really didn't get mad, but the only reason is because Andy's only won one state sportsmanship award. I've won two. My schools have won two. Yours has won two. Jake's won two. Why in the heck are you inviting him? It seems like we ought to get together and, do our own little sportsmanship summit. It seems like we've got it figured out. But we do love Andy. So we won't talk bad about our friend Andy. But one of the things that some of the things that Jody talked about, just spot on. The sportsmanship is important to me. It's always been important to me. And we are going to, again, wherever I'm at, whatever I'm a part of, we're going to try really hard to do things the right way. Our kids are going to act right. Our coaches are going to act right. And if not, they'll be held accountable. Both, both. I've suspended kids myself without a coach's intervention. I've suspended coaches. And it's always going to be because of something like that. It's going to be something that, we have to go out and represent our school and our community. Years ago when I was at Tavares High School, I had a principal named Clyde Panacha who I absolutely loved him. And one day we were talking about something, and he asked me, he said, "What's your primary job?" He was just messing with me, acting like, what do you do anyway? Just screwing around. You can ask Donnie Tucker about him, Jody. But and I looked at him, and I had to come up with something really quick and really short. because his attention span, as much as I loved him, wasn't quite, there. He's like, I said, Clyde, I make you look good. That's my primary job. My primary job is to make you look good. And if I'm doing that, the other stuff, that must mean we're doing it well, because if your phone's not ringing off the wall and, you know what I mean, and you're getting a lot of praise, then we're doing it right. So that's the only thing you need to worry about. But yeah, building community. And I mean, all the schools that I've been at, had a really good sense of community pride. I mean, Apopka was unique because it's such an old school and an older community, like Jody's talking about. Dr. Phillips is newer. And when I say newer, it's probably 30 years old. I think Dr. Olympia is 22 years old, I believe. So that seems like a long time. But, when you grow up in a community like I did in Apopka, where the school's 100+ years old, it's a little bit. And those people bleed blue, and they're there every Friday night for a football game. It don't matter if they're playing Kumquat Tech, or any of that stuff, and the support is always going to be there. So you take those good things and you just try to build it together. And, and I mean, I've become real big on the word culture over the years. I just think culture is what it's all about. You got to have a good culture, and it's got to be something in which you share. It can't be okay, I'm the athletic director, this is what I want our culture to be. Yeah, I'm going to preach that daily, and I'm going to try to live that daily, but it has to be shared. People have to believe the same thing. So you got to get input, and, and it's all about involving, stakeholders. It's kind of irritating to me when, coaches don't really want to have interaction with parents. And listen, I get it. We all have these rules. Okay, well, we don't talk to parents 24 hours, after a game. We have all these different rules, or we don't talk about playing time. We don't talk about strategy. And, a lot of people have those rules. Those are all really good rules. But what I don't think we can isolate the parents and act as if what they think doesn't matter. One thing I tell our coaches is simply this: you got to understand, you don't own this team. If you're the football coach, you don't own the football team. You don't. I mean, this belongs to the community. You're simply a caretaker for a period of time. And quite frankly, if you can't recognize that, then you're going to be the caretaker for a very short period of time, And I just think you got to have that mentality. And they're going to have football here long after that coach is gone. And it's like I try to get people to think about, what's your legacy going to be? What's your legacy going to be when you leave the school for whatever reason? What are you going to want people to say about what happened during that time period? I had a coach one time. He hated to deal with parents. A phenomenal coach and a very good person. Loved him to death. And but he just hated to deal with parents, and I would have to basically force him to, right? Usually because the principal said, "That's it, you're meeting with them," right? And the irony is, the few parent meetings I had that I sat in on him or sat in with him and parents, the best I've ever seen in that environment. But he just couldn't stand the idea that people would question something. Number one, right? And number two, he had this anxiety about the meeting, about there's no way this is going to go good. We don't, we're philosophically different, but he always went in and said the right thing. And every time a meeting ended with him, we were all on the same page. And I would always say, if you would just put that stuff out there, in advance, you probably wouldn't have to have any parent meetings. You know what I mean? But if they're sitting around going, this guy's so unapproachable, blah, 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 you know what I mean? So they have you pegged as being a bad guy, and you're really not. So, kind of doing that stuff. But you've got to get all stakeholders involved in whatever it is you're going to do, and make sure we're all on the same page. I mean, you got one goal. I mean, we're in the kid business. That's basically what it is. And we should all have one goal, and that is to provide all of our student athletes the best opportunity to be successful on and off the field at their maximum capability, whatever that is. You know, I had a coach years ago that won several state championships in a row in a sport, right? And over the course of time, those kids all graduated. And the next year, they won 20% of their games. Went from being I don't want to get too deep because I don't want to give away who it might be, but, you know, I felt like that year that they only won 20% of their games, I felt like that was the best coaching job he did, you know, because those kids, the kids that we had before, they should have won several state championships in a row. I mean, I could have coached them and just rolled out the balls and get out of the way, and they would have won state championships, right? But the year that he won 20% of his games, he had to coach his tail off to win those 20% of the games. And I asked him at the end of the year, I said, well, what do you think? And I'd walk up to him after games, pat him on the back, say, great job. And he'd look at me after they got beat by 30, and he'd say, coach, you know, and I'm going, no, man, you're doing a great job. I'm walking through the gym during practice. It's unbelievable. Never seen him work so hard. And at the end of the year, when he won those very few games, I said to him, I think this might be the best coaching job you've ever done. And he says, you know what? I think you're right. So you have to keep things into perspective. I mean, you can go 4-21 in basketball, but guess what? If that's what you're capable of, our goal is to give them the opportunity to achieve at the highest level possible. And they did that, you know. So, you know, one other thing is about the sportsmanship is one thing I focus on with the sportsmanship is how important it is for us to teach self-control, because that's a lacking quality in our society right now. You know, I mean, with all the violence and stuff everywhere, you know, people get a little bit irritated. Next thing you know, somebody's pulling out a gun and you go, how did we get there? You know what I mean? You know, like we were kids, we just duked it out for 30 seconds. It was over with, you know, but, and I don't want to relate high school athletics to something that extreme, but I think it matters. You know, I mean, it's important for our coaches to exhibit self-control when dealing with officials or opponents or whatever. And they have to and I'm going to hold them accountable for that. That's my job. And then they have to hold kids accountable for the same thing. You know, resist the urge to say something or do something. You know what I mean? And so that's a lot of things, I know, but those are basically, you know, a lot of the same qualities that Jody talked about. But if you're going to summarize it, look up the word culture and try to build a culture involving all stakeholders that gives your kids the best opportunity to be successful.
You know, that was all great stuff. I dare say a masterclass for an athletic director. And the part about, you know, parents, meeting with parents, you know, I mention this all the time when I do a presentation. You know, I had an okay high school career, but never once did my mom or dad ever even think of going to the coach and say, hey, you got a minute? You know, they didn't need to, but it just didn't happen. And, you know, fast forward, whatever, 40, 50 years, that's not the way it is now. Parents are going to be involved. And as athletic directors, we need to help our coaches do exactly what you talked about. You know, have those conversations, be intentional about it, you know, share up front. And then, as you said, you know, you're probably not going to have as many of those, hey, you got a minute, coach? Because you guys know it's never a minute conversations. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's do this now. We're going to do it again.
Real quick, Jake. I did want to add one thing to that. The coach that didn't really like dealing with parents, he one time he looked at me. I just got to share this because it kind of goes hand in hand with that. One time he looked at me when we were talking about having a parent meeting. He's going, Russell, you know what my dream job is? I said, what? He said, an orphanage.
Yeah.
So anyway, had to throw that one in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, we talk about that frequently. Let's do this now, and we'll do it again at the end of the podcast. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick the brain of a couple of master athletic administrators, Russell, we'll start with you. What's the best way that they can get a hold of you to find out more?
Well, if they're wanting to pick the brains of some master athletic administrators, I've got a list of 5 or 6. So if they contact me, I'll get that information out to them so they can talk to someone that has a clue. Yeah, with me, it's easy. I mean, I have a school email address, and that's the best way to reach me, russell.wambles@ocps.net. So russell.wambles@ocps.net.
Okay. And Jody, I know you're no longer an athletic director, but you still have a ton of wisdom for some listeners. What's the best way that they could get in touch with you?
Email would be as well. It's calcofarms@icloud.com, CALCOFARMS@icloud.com.
And Jody will give them the same list of names to contact.
I will. Either of us are going to provide the same list, right? Right. But we're that's what we're good at is providing good direction and directing them to folks, you know, like Jake Von Shearer that can actually help them. That can actually help them.
I was gonna say Andy Childs is going to be at the top of all of our lists. All right.
Yeah.
All right. For our listeners, we're going to take a quick break, but we're coming back with some more. We'll have some serious stuff and maybe a couple humorous stories as well. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Gipper for their support of the podcast. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to help you create professional quality sports graphics for your school in seconds. It's so easy, even I can do it. Celebrate your athletes and promote your teams and join the 3,000 athletic programs, both high school and college, across the country that are using Gipper. Become a professional graphic designer. It's so simple. Talk with the Gipper team. You'll get access to thousands of sport graphic templates along with the instruction on how to do it. Once again, it's incredibly easy. Go to Gipper.com right now. Start creating custom content for your school's social media channel. We also want to say thanks to all the people at Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you as an athletic director do your job better. If you're looking for a fundraiser, look no further. Snap Raise is fantastic. We used it at our school with great success, and so can you. They even have a program where they will give you your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. Nobody else does that. Also, you should check out Snap Store, Snap Manage, Snap Spin, Snap Connect. Check out the entire suite. You'll find it all at snapraise.com. And we want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule a live web demo, and see their tables and their boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made as an AD was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Their products not only generate income for your department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. You'll find it all at sidelineinteractive.com. Check them out today. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guests today are Jody Phillips and Russell Wambles, two longtime athletic directors, both former FIAAA presidents, athletic administration legends here in Florida. Anybody that's been involved in the world of athletics, particularly what we call educational athletics, is going to have encountered some humorous, some challenging, some memorable situations over their time. And Russell and Jody are certainly no exceptions. Many times these humorous, or maybe you're crying first and laughing later situations, also yield a lesson learned. So we're going to try to learn some lessons here, maybe by relating some humorous anecdotes. So Russell, we're going to go and start with you. I know that's dangerous, but what's a story that you can share from your days as an athletic administrator that, again, fits into this category? Anything come to mind?
Well, yeah, plenty. But anyway, first of all, I want to say I'm, extremely humbled That's my word, to be able to do this podcast with the well-known humble pig farmer from Marion County, who is the only two-time past president in the history of the FIAAA. I'm not really sure how you get to be past president twice, since you only get to be president once. But well, whatever. He's the only guy. He's that big a deal. But no, I think about I think in your first book where we talked about stuff, I think one of my best practices, I believe, was said to make sure you enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride, and have fun. And so as long as I'm doing this, we're all going to try to have fun. There's going to be serious moments, but we're gonna have fun. All those years we spent, I think I was on the FIAAA board like 22 years or something, which is crazy. And it was a lot of work. There's a lot of work involved in that, but we also had a lot of fun. So we tried to balance that out. And we'd have the hospitality room at night, whether it be at the conference, at the board meetings and stuff. And there was a lot of humorous things that occurred and things that were said, and many of which I probably can't share on this podcast. But I tell you what, everybody walked out of the room having built relationships and having stories that we could all share for years to come. And and then when you think back at it and you go, hey, you remember the time? There's nothing better than that, to hear. You remember the time? But one quick thing I want to say is, since Kevin's not here, it makes it much easier to say. When Kevin was finished his presidential term, that makes you the past president. And so what happens is there's a football. There's a football that gets signed by all the presidents. Now you have to understand, a lot of these people are no longer with us. They're deceased. So you can't replace that football. It's irreplaceable. And so the first night at the banquet, Kevin set the football down on his chair so he could go up to the buffet. And I told Valerie Miyares, now I wasn't going to do it. I'm more of an instigator than an action guy. You know what I mean? I'm the idea guy. We have other people that do the work, right? So Val was pretty young at the time. And I said, Val, go get the football and go put it in your room. So she did, which amazed me that she would just do that so willingly. She's like, and I said, it'll be funny. Kevin gets back to the chair, and you have to know Ron Balazs was the first executive director of the organization. He was the executive director, and Ron would always tell people when they pass that football around that don't lose that blankety blank 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 football, or else you're going to get your blankety. You know what I mean? He was very direct in the instructions, and so Kevin was panicking. So eventually, about an hour later, Val went and got it out of the trunk of her car and brought it back, so he couldn't freak out. Fast forward a few months, get a call from Kevin. Actually, Ron Balazs got a call from Kevin. He said, Ron, you'll never believe this. My football got stolen. And Ron's like, where was it at? It's in my office. I had it setting up on the mantle, blah, blah, blah. Got stolen. So Ron pulled a Ron on him and, gave him negative feedback about that. And so Kevin, a couple of days later, I guess, and I don't know how much time passes, he didn't know what he's going to do. He didn't want to have to face the whole board about this. And basically, a custodian calls him on the radio, I think it was, and said, hey, is this football yours? And the custodian had found it outside of a dumpster outside. And what had happened was someone had broke into Kevin's office, had stole several things, one of them being the football. Well, I guess they thought it was maybe the 1972 Miami Dolphins or something on it. I don't know what they thought. So eventually they're looking at the names and they realize, I don't know any of these people. So they threw it away. So he got it back from the dumpster and all is well. It's still traveling around, thank goodness.
We've those of us in the FIAAA have heard that story a couple of times, but again, the drama that would have been involved from Kevin's standpoint, is I think we can all relate to that. But again, and again, the three of us, we also know Ron Balazs and can very easily picture him doing that. So great stuff. Jody, what's something that you could share with our listeners that maybe has a little humorous twist to it?
Well, we may come back to a Ron story possibly, but which is pretty good. It's going to be number 2 on my list, and I'm going to assume Russell knows number 1, so I'm going to tell number 1 first. So I show up, and at some point, in my board tenure, and for a weekend in September meeting, and my buddy there says, "Hey, you got nothing going on? You want to go over to my football game with me tonight?" Sure. Hop in the
Oh my
car,
God.
go to his football game, and we're there. I've got on my baby blue FIAAA shirt on. Well, it so happens that his school colors were like navy and baby blue and white at the time, which again is the color of my FIAAA shirt. So, on goes the game, and game ends. We're standing over on the track, and some very nice young lady comes up to me and shakes my hand and congratulates me on the victory for my team. And I said to her, "Ma'am, please don't associate me with that cheater school. I don't have anything to do with them." And so she was just a bit astonished. And the folks that were standing around, Deemer may have been standing right there actually.
I think he was, and I think Lamar Glenn was there.
Yeah, and Lamar Glenn, who was the athletic director at the other school, and Deemer was the county AD. And so anyway, to kind of tie this up, come to find out that the lady that I told her to not associate me with Russell's cheater school was the superintendent of schools for his school district, and I didn't know that. So anyway, I think that led to a little uneasiness for those around that night, at least for one person. Certainly not me, and not Lamar Glenn, but we got a good kick out of it afterwards.
I got Jody out of that circle there quickly, pulled him off. I was like, "What are you doing?" Yeah, it was a challenging experience.
Yeah. Because if I have to say, Jake, and we don't want to get into the gist of all of it, but Russell had kind of been brought into that situation, I think, because there had been a few little issues over time, maybe, and that he was needing to correct. And so it wasn't really, it was bad timing on my part to bring that up.
But there was a kernel of truth in your message, and probably more directed towards Russell and not at the superintendent.
It certainly, and if I would have, honest to goodness, if I would have known that that's who it was, I would have never said it. But the way it worked out, I think you mentioned earlier, is one of those we'll probably never forget that one type thing.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, that I think that was my first year at that school, and so there were some, there had been some things where people would say, "Well, this school's recruiting," blah. I had no idea if they were or not. All I can tell you is, they were not during the time period that I was there. That's all I can tell you. But it was really just an inside joke with all of us, and Jody just happened to share it with the absolute last person in the world that it should have been shared with.
Hey, timing's critical. Okay.
Right.
All right. Russell, we're going to ping pong it back to you. Anything else you can share with our listeners that, while humorous, there might be a lesson in there somewhere.
Oh, I got caught up in that story. So, Jody, I'm sure you got another one. Let me think here. Because I got a lot of stuff. I got a lot of stuff. Most of it I can't share. That's the problem. So
right, the Colonel. I guess I needed to end that previous thing, Jake. The Colonel to get out of that is don't cheat. That was the moral of the story. So
moral. Now all of a sudden, hey, now that Jody Phillips, hey, listen, now that Jody Phillips is retired, he all of a sudden has morals.
Right. So here was another. One of the funny ones. You go in, and I go in and, through tenure leading up to becoming president of FIAAA, there's a lot of stories and such that go on. And I never thought early on, with Ron being Ron, for those that know him, and of course, listeners won't know who Ron Balazs is necessarily, but let's just say, Ron was a man's man, and he's a coach's coach, and he was, did things a certain way, and he had a high bar, and his expectations were high, and he wanted those around him to fulfill that, and it was easy to figure that out sitting across the table from him, and so, I never, I don't know that I was scared, but certainly, or intimidated, but there was a level of fear, kind of like I thought of him as sort of one of my old coaches type thing. And where this goes is just to say, as I did become, president of the organization, the man helped me unbelievably, along with Russell and others. I did, but Ron really was that person that would just he would stand by your side and help you. And so you had a lot of respect for him. And we got into a situation one time, though, and I know we had a lot of technologically sound folks around us. And, and I'm not necessarily the biggest techie in the world, but I remember being in a board meeting, and it's Mike Colby, I think, sharing some things, and whomever else, about technology, this and the way things are going to go, and presentations and so on. And they said, we're going to put this out in the cloud. And and Ron says, where's the cloud? And so again, without expending a bunch of time, the moral was, between Ron and I at that time period, pretty much everything he ever asked me from that point on, my answer was simply, Ron, we're just putting it in the cloud.
Yeah, it's in the cloud, Ron.
It's in the cloud, Ron.
Yeah.
And,
I think we were all there for that meeting, because that is an FIAAA gold nugget. It's in the cloud.
Yes, it's in the cloud.
So we had a
let me go ahead and jump in here real quick, Russ.
Okay.
We actually, for regular listeners of our podcast, Jody, which I know you're a new listener, but regular listeners, we had an interview with Ron Balazs. It was interview number 400, and he did a great job of sharing, his history as an athletic director here in Florida. Shared that he, played football for a little bit for Woody Hayes at Ohio State, and really, was there kind of at the beginning of the FIAAA. So,
Right.
Again, they haven't met him in person, but regular listeners, they've had a chance to hear Ron Balazs.
Good. Well, that's good. That's good.
All right,
Fine,
Russell.
man.
Okay, you're back in.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something when he was talking about Ron and stuff. Back in the days, I mean, I was president. I don't even know what year. It was a long time ago. So, back in those days, we had incredible mentors, right? With Ron being one of them, but you could go down the list: Trish Hyland, Tom Stoll, Dave Horner, just people that we talk about. But once you became the president-elect, so for those that don't know, and with the FIAAA, the president-elect runs the conference. So you're held accountable for anything that happens there. So you're just a constant nervous wreck. And we were constantly trying to raise the bar at the conference. At the conference. And so it gets a little bit more difficult. I think it's more difficult now to be a president-elect than it was, So, we're raising the bar, and, the further you go back, the less resources we had to work with, now, through some of the sponsorships we've done over the past few years, they can put on a conference and not stress as to whether or not they have money about, and that makes a big difference. And, but anyway, back in those days, you're president-elect, and then you become president, and during that 2-year stretch, it was a little intimidating, even for those of us with type A personalities who, kind of act like, yeah, I don't really care. you do care, you know what I mean? Because it was kind of intimidating. So you sat there in that seat for 2 years, that track, not so much the past president, but the first 2 years. And you say something and you look in the back corner and Trish and Tom are there talking to each other and they're shaking their head. So now you're going, oh crap, what did I say? You know, I'm obviously wrong, right? And then Ron would just tell you that, no, we're not. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. We're not doing that. You know what I mean? But you were just constantly a nervous wreck, and Jody can vouch for that. It's like, so you're all of your plans for your meeting, when you're sitting around planning, you're planning for those 3 or 4 people, not the other 30 in the room. You're like, how can I cover this in a way that is not just make me feel like a complete moron? But they were fantastic mentors and stuff. But yeah, it was. I'm telling you, it was intimidating. You know, I mean, Trish was one of my mentors, and she was the reason I came onto that board. I mean, however many, I think it was 22 years ago or something. She was the Orange County AD, and I worked in Lake County. And when she left being the district director, which at the time Lake was there, I don't know if it still is or not, but you know, she basically was going to be able to appoint. I mean, there's an election, but yeah, back in those days, there weren't that many people jumping up and down wanting to do it. So, you know, she could have appointed, you know, anybody she wanted to in Orange County. And instead she called me and she said, I think you'd be the best fit for this. So that's how I became on the board member. The Orange County AD kind of appointed me to it. But she, you know, she's, you know, not a very big lady or any of that stuff. But let me tell you that she's not timid in any way, shape, or form. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talking about appointments, again, I need to thank you for appointing me so many years ago to fill a vacancy on the board, and you know that I was able to have that front row seat. You know, and Jody, you were still there too. You know, to get involved and continue to be involved with FIAAA. So, and you're absolutely right. You know that president-elect position and the president, you feel the pressure. You know, you want to excel in front of your peers and for the organization. So great stuff. Okay. We're going to take one final break, and then we're going to come back with our athletic director toolbox segment. For Russell, it's going to be a pop quiz. See if he can remember the tools that he suggested 3 years ago. And for Jody, he's going to be a first-time contributor. So let's take that final break, but we'll be coming back with more on the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at District 1 for their support. That's District WON. And you're going to feel like you've won when you check out their custom team uniforms. They also give you shipping in 20 business days or less, and you're never going to have to order a complete set again when you just need 1 or 2 replacements. Go to district1.com, click on the team gear button, and get your free quote. District1.com. We want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. If you go to hometownticketing.com, they're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets online, not just for your athletic events, but things like school plays, concerts, school dances, even graduation. And the best part, you'll have a dedicated client success manager providing hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com right now and get started. Simple and easy online ticketing. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to show you how they can create a custom survey for your athletic department that's going to allow you to take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. Athletic directors usually only hear back from the complainers, the people who want to gripe about everything. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you with that 2%. And also the 98% that love and support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking to that frustrated parent or your principal or your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Get started today. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with two master athletic administrators from the state of Florida, Russell Wambles and Jody Phillips. But we always wrap up with the athletic toolbox segment. Now, Russell, you were on our very first season. I want to say it was episode number 8, and I think today's episode is 438. And I don't know if you remember those 3 tools that you suggested, but if you do, let's hear them again. And if for some reason you don't, what are 3 tools that you would want to give to a brand new athletic director?
Well, the 3 that we discussed in season 1 was being a lifelong learner. And the big thing about that is I've been out 3 or 4 years now. So I'm back in. And I feel like, I mean, I walked in last June or May or whenever it was, and I felt like a complete buffoon because things have changed so much in the last 3 or 4 years. And some of it, changed because of COVID and it just stayed the same. And, yeah, so I had a lot to learn this year. So in a lot of ways, I felt like I was a new AD. It was kind of weird. But another was communication, and my advice about communication is that too much is way better than not enough. So communicate, be proactive rather than reactive. You can't cover everything, but try. That's the way I look at it. Have fun and laugh. And if you can't do that, I mean, it's just not. I think any job. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to do these things that we can enjoy. So, I mean, I kind of feel for people who are forced to be employed in things in which that's, they have to, rather than want to. So, if I would just add one more thing, I don't know, I heard this 100 years ago from someone, and it's hard. There's so much to do in this job, right? So it's easy to get task driven, and, many, many years ago, someone said to me, people are more important than task. And, so if you take that route, a lot of the tasks can be put off, but you can't put the people off, because that's when things go south. So that's my advice.
Oh, absolutely. I'm writing those down as we speak. We're going to add them to the toolbox. Jody, this is your first time again on the podcast, but you've done a great job here. What are 3 tools that you would want to put into a new athletic director's toolbox?
Okay, as far as the toolbox and the things that we wanted to use, and you mentioned earlier, we try to steal everything from somebody else because it's already proven entity. First thing that I'd probably jump on that we would want to have for a new person, I think that they would want to investigate is culture. And I know that Russell alluded to that earlier. I think that's a huge factor in anything that someone new is going into. You inspect what you have. And if I'm a first year AD, Russell's a first year AD. Although he's done it for 100 years, he's a first year at this particular school. I'm quite sure that he went in and evaluated what it was that he had to deal with from a culture perspective, because and it's not that you're going to walk in and change the culture the first day or the 100th day or whatever the story is, but you are going to evaluate it, and you're going to let folks know that you are evaluating that. Because if you're tasked with running an athletic program, at some point in time between yourself and that principal, the culture is going to have to match. If not, there's going to be a ton of frustration. So, I think that's very, 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 very vital. The other thing that mentioned earlier, and I would stay on as well with a new AD, has to do with sportsmanship, and that plays into the culture. And I don't want to necessarily thrive on it, but it needs to be a part of the culture that you're creating. Uh, and then the other thing that I think is extremely important, and I know it can get carried away a little bit with today's kids, but you can't forget about this. And I'm going to brag on Russell because he was extremely good at this. And we shared a lot of stuff back and forth, and that is student recognition, coach recognition, and being able to recognize those that have done things that are positive. And it doesn't mean that they ran for the most yards or whatever it might be. There's a lot of different ways to recognize people that are good to the program, people that do that achieve things within a program. So, of course, student athlete recognition, scholarship recognition for those that are moving on. I mean, there's a lot of different things, and that's probably a lot to me, those three things, when you just sort of think about them as a whole. If you accomplished a little bit of each of them in your first year, and made some positive changes with those three things, I think you'd be headed in the right direction. And because I'll end it with this, Jake, I think my goal when I left my last AD job at Forest, and I'd been there for quite a number of years and taken over for a gentleman, done a great job, and so it was easy to continue that. But I literally walked out of that job and I thought to myself, and it was my alma mater. And I thought to myself, I'm walking away from something here, and this group of coaches that were there, I truly felt like every single one of them were better than me. And they understood what we wanted and what our students needed. And what I really was so proud of that, to leave that particular situation and think to myself, I think that these coaches that are in place at this school care more about kids than I do, and the success that those kids are going to have. And I'm not just talking wins and losses at all, and so, and I think we really strove for that. And ultimately, I could say that I was able to achieve it in that particular scenario, because when I left, that's how I felt. And it's a great feeling.
Well, all the tools were fantastic. And I love the one that you finished with. I think that's a goal that, let's say, the better leaders do, is they try to surround themselves with the best people and people that are, in fact, better than them and can do things that they can't do. And that's why you see programs like yours, like Russell's, have the success that they achieve. And you mentioned it, the success that we measure in many different ways beyond the wins and the losses. But, oh, by the way, we do pretty good in those too. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's do it one more time. If one of our listeners wants to reach out, pick your brains a little bit. Jody, we'll go and start with you. What's the best way they can get a hold of Jody Phillips?
Email. It's calcofarms@icloud.com, calcofarms@icloud.com.
Okay.
And Russell, your contact?
The same thing, email russell.wambles@ocps.net, russell.wambles@ocps.net.
Okay. Gentlemen, thanks for sharing with our listeners today. And once again, thanks so much for the impact that you've had and continue to have on my life. I count you as, great mentors and also great friends. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
For listeners, we do this just about every day, and we upload the Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening. Come back next time for more great tips for athletic directors and best practices on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.